Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are going to talk on the recent killings in Nagaland and the growing public resentment which is demanding the repeal of the Armed Forces Special Power Act. An army action in the village of Oting in the Mon district of Nagaland, that's the district that adjoins Arunachal Pradesh, led to the loss of 15 lives. A number of questions have been raised regarding the encounter by the armed forces. This encounter of the armed forces somehow went horribly wrong. Several apex tribal organizations have started agitation against this encounter, asking for serious action against the responsible army officers. The volatile situation is likely to lead to further breach of public peace and tranquility in the state. At present, to contain the situation, the government of Nagaland has suspended mobile and internet services in the district of Mon in Nagaland and imposed Section 144 of the CRPC, which imposes or prohibits gathering of more than 5 persons. The Nagaland government has issued a statement on this heart-wrenching incident, and the opposition parties have also given statements terming the horrible encounter as a result of total intelligence failure of the defense forces. The Nagaland-based core of the army issued a statement that the specific operations were planned on the basis of intelligence reports about the movements of insurgency in this area. The hardcore insurgent groups of NSCN-IM, which is involved in the Naga peace talks with the government, has also described this incident as a black day for the Nagas. On NISSMAT forum today, we have Brigadier V. Suresh and the President of NISSMAT, Mr. Sipal Singh, former IGP and who has during their active services remained posted in these areas. Mr. Sipal Singh raised the Rapid Action Force for the Government of India and also raised the Internal Security Academy, which is a central police academy at Mount Abu in the Indian state of Rajasthan. He is one of the most highly distinguished and decorated police officers, having been honored with the President's Police Medal, the Indian Police Medal for Meritorious Service, the Police Special Duty Medal with Bar, the Sana Medal, and a number of other commendations and rewards. Brigadier Suresh was commissioned into the infantry in March of 1972 after graduating from the National Defence Academy and the Indian Military Academy in Dehradun. As a colonel, he commanded an infantry battalion in Assam and as a brigade commander in Manipur. He is a postgraduate of the Defence Services Staff College, and he has served as the brigade major of a brigade. He has served in the Military Operations Directorate in New Delhi. He has been a directing staff in Wellington Staff College. He has served in the United Nations Peacekeeping Force in Cambodia. And in the year of 2006, he superannuated. And after that, he's been indulging in studies on the military subjects. My first question to you, Brigadier Suresh. A very serious incident occurred on 4th of December, where a number of civilians were killed in Nagaland in an ambush by the armed forces on the basis of intelligence report regarding movement of insurgents in the area of Mon district. Now, you've remained posted in this area for a long time. How do you explain the ambush and firing by the army personnel on the civilian coal miners as they were returning to their homes? Brigadier Suresh.
Yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Pawan. Good evening, Mr. Sipal. At the outset, I consider it a great privilege to be invited to be part of this interview, and especially so being invited in an organization which involves my postmate and squadron mate, my dear friend Pawan Ahluwalia. Thank you so much, Pawan. Thank you for the introduction too. I think before we take the incident per se, most of our countrymen are quite ignorant of the Northeast.
People saying you remain in the police in that area, and after all, any army action depends upon intelligence or information that is provided to them. In this case, was the information that came in into the armed forces, was it generated individually by the defense services, or was it also police involvement?
No, by and large, any operation, maybe it is the police against the terrorists, or maybe it's the army against the insurgents, has to be based on the basis of certain intelligence reports. There are intelligence reports which go haywire. Sometimes intelligence reports are not correct, but that does not mean that we, either in the defense forces or in the police, should resort to brutal killing. Of course, there are reasons sometimes where to have a safety of our own person, we have to resort to firing. But in my view, the provisions laid down under the Armed Forces Special Police Force Act sometimes make our people. This is applicable not only to defense forces, this act is also applicable to the armed forces of Central Police Armed Forces like CRPPSF. Sometimes our boys, they mentally get trigger happy, or they start out of this thing that our life is in danger, they start firing. So the question is, intelligence reports can get haywire. Sometimes intelligence reports are not correct. Sometimes firing it has to be resorted. But to what extent and to what degree we have to resort to force, that is a question.
Suresh, are you getting your slide on?
Yeah. I think I'll skip that. I'll just mention about it. Uh, Nagaland is one of the seven sisters of the northeastern region of our country, and as we all know, northeast is an extremely important portion of our country, both from security and strategic perspective. I would consider it as much as JNK or anywhere else, and northeast is our link to east. As they say, look east, act east. Nothing can happen without the northeast being in the being totally with us. So Northeast has its importance, and Nagaland is a small state, a very small state, part of the Seven Sisters. Not so small, maybe about 6 to 7 times the size of Goa, and it borders Manipur to the south. It borders Assam to the north and west, and a small portion of Arunachal in the northeast, and of course Myanmar on the east. Myanmar borders mostly Mon district and Phake district to the south. So Mon district is where this incident has taken place, and Mon, as we all know, I want to say, they are basically Konyak tribes. As you know, the whole of Nagaland has many tribes. 19 of them very the major tribes, and Konyak is one tribe which is partly in India but mostly in Myanmar. Konyak tribe. And the rest, of course, the Semas, Angamis, Aos, Chakesangs are all distributed all over Nagaland, various districts, and they have distinct ethnic differences culturally, even within tribal, and even language is different. They speak different language even. So there is a lot of what we know as Nagaland is essentially various Naga tribes. Now, this insurgency has been on for so long. We all are aware, and it's early 50s when Nagaland, the Naga people under Fizo declared independence the day before India became independent, and then thereafter the insurgency went on. There were phases of insurgency in Nagaland. Indian Army had moved in, and suffice to say that with a lot of intervention by the Intelligence Bureau and the Armed Forces, the first 2 phases of insurgency was well controlled till the Shillong Accord was signed in 1975, which was a very great achievement. It was a breakthrough achievement where the various fighting factions recognized Indian constitution, and they didn't look forward to independence but more autonomy. Unfortunately, 2 figures in that National Council NSC took different ways, and basically Muiwa and Kaplan, and they broke away from NNC, and they had their own, they made their own faction, which was the NSC and NSC, which again broke up into two, NSC and IM and NSC and Kaplan. Now, NSC and IM and Kaplan this is the 1980s or late 70s. I would consider this is the most bloodiest part of the Naga insurgency, although it went on from the 60s to late 70s, but I would still consider that as the most bloodiest part of the insurgency. And maximum casualties to Indian Army and armed forces, as also police forces, occurred during this period. So that is the background. Then, of course, the ceasefire came with NSC and IM. Then the framework, Naga Peace Agreement framework, was signed quite recently, and we are nearing to a solution on resolving the Naga problem as of now, as you are all aware. Kaplan faction stayed away, mostly stayed away from the framework peace agreement also, and they have been creating problems. But by and large, NSCN-K was not a major threat to Indian Army or India as such. So they were not considered as a great threat. But once this framework agreement was signed, and they started evolving themselves, integrating with other northeastern insurgent groups like the PLA, etc., it became a threat. And you know what happened some time back when the Assam Rifles attacked, and then the special forces went into Myanmar and carried out a surgical strike, and then followed by the killing of the commandant of Assam Rifles and his family. So all this have led to deterioration of the situation as far as the Kaplan faction is concerned. The Kaplan faction is no more called NSC and K, but NSC and KYK, that is NSC and Cognac. Basically, the leader is, I think, the nephew of Kaplan, and somebody else also. The two personalities in that. And since the killing of the colonel some time back and his family, there must have been a requirement for the Indian Army to put them in the right place, no doubt about it. And as you all know, this was basically, although this the colonel incident happened in Kakching in More near in Manipur, because that is where they can integrate better with PLA. But the area of influence of NSCN-K is more in Nagaland, that is in the Mon district, as also across in Myanmar. That's probably why this operation was carried out in Mon district. Now, as far as this incident is concerned, there was absolute intelligence received as per all the statements, all media statements, as also by the declaration by the government. And intelligence was received that there is a movement of NSC-K cadres within Mon district, which has happened earlier also, and there have been gunfight and gunfire. So similar sort of an intelligence evolved from the core headquarters, I believe, as also it is corroborated by the IB2. So the question you asked, Mr. Sipal Singh, that how does intelligence has to evolve from the ground. I'm sure the local police must also be involved in giving this intelligence. There's no doubt about it. Otherwise, this intelligence would not have come up. I'll introspect that a little bit later, if that be the case. Now, what happened? The 21 para SF was deployed to intercept this movement of militants. And please note that it is not Assam Rifles or any other force, because the special forces themselves were instructed. That means the intelligence was taken rather very seriously. Otherwise, it would have been just a normal ambush by the Assam Rifles or some other force. So certainly, it was an intelligence worth following up, and special forces, professional as they are, and well equipped and trained as they are, they were given this task, and they deployed themselves in the site of where they probably found a suitable tactical area, and it is somewhere near Othing village, north of Mon town per se. And they deployed themselves, and at around 5:30 or so in the northeast, it gets dark. It's as good as 9 o'clock. 5:30 is 9 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the northeast. It gets dark. So when this vehicle came along, I believe the vehicle color and the make was on the similar lines as that was in the intelligence, as per the intelligence. And when it passed through, they used a spotoscope to identify the occupants of the vehicle, and they found that there were some people seated in the vehicle, and some were carrying weapons too. Now, to argue that why didn't you identify, etc., it's immaterial now. When they see spotoscope and an intelligence input and vehicle moving, so obviously they conclude that it is the movement of militants. Now,
okay, I have a question to ask. My question actually stems from the fact that how does the intelligence, get into an actionable incident? Now, there was intelligence that said that there's movement of the insurgents. Well, actually, it was not so. This is the mute point that I'm talking of. How was it an intelligence failure? Not the conduct of the ambush, but it appears to be an intelligence failure, a failure of information that was passed from the bottom to the top, and then it came into action. Where do you think it went wrong?
No, I agree, Pawan. Intelligence failure will come when it is proved that the incident has gone wrong, awry, isn't it? So let us see why the incident went awry first. I think that's very important to be dissected, because intelligence failure only counts if this ambush was a success. There is no failure in intelligence. So obviously there is a intelligence failure, but because this ambush went awry, it came out that intelligence was wrong. So let us see why the ambush went awry.
I'd like to switch over to Mr. I just want to switch over to Mr. Sipal. What, in your opinion, Mr. Sipal, saying, was it an intelligence failure of intelligence? And how did the collation of information go horribly wrong?
Yes, I am of the view that I am going to divide it into two parts. First is whether there was an intelligence failure or not, and secondly, were the operations conducted properly, even if there was intelligence failure. These are the two aspects which to be considered. And I want to say one thing is very sure, that the intelligence did fail, because if they were insurgents, it would have come out, yes, they are insurgents. So intelligence failure was there. To what extent, I cannot say. As far as the operation as such is concerned, I like to confine only to operation. It is being alleged. It is being alleged that when the vehicle came and they stopped the vehicle, at the first firing which took place, which they suspected them to be insurgents, there were about 8 people who were shot at. Now the vehicle was not stopped, and all the 8 people shot at. Whether they carried a weapon or not, I'm not going to go into details. The court of inquiry has been ordered, and a major general is going to conduct the court already. I am sure the court of inquiry will be very objective, and it will bring forth as to what were the reasons for this. Now, most of the army officers and army formations have also labeled this particular ambush encounter as a botched up operation. It is very well realized, sir, that counter-terrorist operations are very difficult in this area. It is well realized that these operations are full of uncertainties. It is well realized that there are a lot of challenges. It is well realized that the death is facing almost every contour or every corner of these hill areas. Sometimes when the terrorists attack, number of casualties of the armed forces take place. I'm not denying that. What I am trying to emphasize is, sir, that irrespective of these challenges, first of all is whether this particular operation was a botched up operation due to intelligence failure, or the operation as such. That court of inquiry will bring forth.
So now let me
Second is the lot of hue and cry is going ahead that there should be repeal of armed forces special.
I'll come to that slightly later, but let's discuss the conduct of the operations and the intelligence that was provided based on which the conduct of the operation should have occurred. Now, Suresh, what in your opinion has gone wrong?
Yeah, Pawan, listen. Let us leave the intelligence aside. Intelligence has come, operation started. Let us finish the operation, then we'll see why the intelligence has gone wrong. Let us see how, has the operation been botched up or operation has gone wrong? Let us see that. So let us reassess what exactly went. Of course, most of it may be speculation, but what I am committing is what I learned from ground, from 21SF and the people who are around in Nagaland. Now, what I am told, when I was mentioning that they saw through the spotter scope people sitting inside with weapons, but they didn't fire. The scout waved the vehicle to stop. Number one scout waved the vehicle to stop. It is reported that the vehicle did not stop and it moved on. So then the scout has given the information to the next party ahead. You know how the ambush is laid. They're not in one place. They're in different parts. They special forces especially. The second ambush party, second scout was also when the vehicle reached. They signaled it to stop. It didn't stop. Then they fired at the tires. The party has fired at the tires. The vehicle stopped because there was no choice. It was immobilized. Moment it got immobilized, the person from the vehicle jumped and ran. Now, I will not say because they were insurgents they ran. It's quite possible, even the villagers traveling in a vehicle, when they get fired upon a tire, when they find army or even in another maybe a insurgent group stopping, then they will run. They will run. Of course, they will run. And even non-stopping also could be attributed to that, out of sheer fear. But to the man on ground, he doesn't know. He has no such. He only knows I have got intelligence that militants are going through. I have to deal with them. That is what he's there. He's on ground. So when the people ran, they fired, and in that firing, 6 people died. No doubt, 6 people died. Immediately they realized the mistake. They got the people together, and there were 2 injured people. And the 2 injured people were evacuated to the nearest hospital with one team. With one team, took the 2 people to the hospital. The very fact that they have taken these 2 injured to the hospital shows there is no intention to cover up, nor any intention to kill, without any intent, with any ill intent. And then they wanted to report to the police station, but somehow that could not take place. Before the police could or even after the report to the police station, it is said that the police did not arrive. So there is also a need to see why the delay was there, which we can discuss. Then these by the time these people had gone to with the hospital, and the remaining people were sorting out the ground there, the mob gathered, huge mob gathered. It must have come. They must have come to hear the noise and the melee. The mob gathered, and the mob gathered around them and surrounded them, and there was a lot of melee there. There were a lot of, and it is the 21SF tried their best to mollify the crowd, but as you know, the mass is an ass, so they would have misbehaved. They didn't fire, or they didn't do anything in self-defense at that point of time. When one of the boys was attacked with the machete, and his neck got half severed. Then there was little bit of more exchange, and they even took away their weapons, which they said, so you take out your magazines and give the weapon, and they agreed. They said, okay, this is before the killing. They said, okay, fine, because after all, they're villages, so they wanted to pacify them and come to an agreement, but did not happen. When this boy was cut with his da, he was also fired. He was also fired upon. And the villagers did not have any weapons. There is no weapon they had, but they were fired upon, and I'm told it is 7.62 weapon. So obviously within the crowd, they could have been an insurgent or a militant or sympathizers or underground worker could have been there. But all said and done, there was no damage except in that self-defense, which how much special forces are equipped. They're loaded with ammunition and in all sorts of weapons. They could have massacred them, but they did not massacre. They fired. 2 more people died. That's exactly incident happened. Then I believe when they put the vehicle on fire, the vehicle was torched. Their vehicle was torched, and along with the vehicle, there were grenades in the vehicle which exploded. Grenades exploded with the fire, and here in the explosion, the crowd got worried, saying that more reinforcements are come, and then they dispersed. This is the sequence of events. It was reported to the police station, and in the melee, the complete team of para SF have been injured. One killed, all of them in critical ICU. If they had to butcher them, I don't think it's a big task to destroy a mob of this kind. But they have not done that. They have done absolutely in self-defense. So while I 100% agree that the intelligence may have been wrong, the operation went awry, it's a mistake committed, no doubt about it. But unfortunately, these are what the price we pay for our insecurity, or let us say when our population gets mixed up with the insurgents. So this is the price to pay for that. This is the price to pay for that. Unfortunate, very, very unfortunate. And I am not at all sympathizing with the army or the special forces. They are one of the best trained force in the Indian Army, the best trained force in the Army. And 21 SF carried out their Operation Pursuit into Myanmar. They're the best trained, and so there's no question of them doing a mistake per se.
So I think what an analysis is that based on the information, a perfect ambush was laid. The people who got caught in the ambush were the wrong guys, and there were casualties, and the civilians then got together and attacked the ambush party, and the ambush party then in self-defense they hurt a couple of other people, and in the bargain the ambush party also was hurt badly by the civilians. So now this is the sequence of events that's gone across. But now Mr. Sipal saying, what exactly is the Armed Forces Special Power Act?
This is the Armed Forces Special Powers Act actually is a legacy of the ordinance which was promulgated in 1942. That is called Armed Forces Special Powers Ordinance at the time of Quit India movement. That gave certain powers to the forces to operate, to conduct searches, to arrest people, and if required, also to shoot them down, shoot to kill. These were those times in 42. In 1958, that Armed Forces Special Powers Act was promulgated in Nagaland. Now 58, now we are into 221. So more than 70 years, about 70 years have passed. We have put this act there. And I am of the view that despite this act, despite the need of being this promulgating this act, despite the fact that immunity has to be provided to the armed forces, but it should not give a mental attitude to the armed forces that since the immunity is provided, hence they can help and they can have a trigger happy approach. I am of the view, a very firm view, that once you have this sort of attitude coming in the forces, and once they start feeling that it is like a conventional warfare, kill and dominate over the area, then it is not a question of solution, internal solution. It is a different side of mindset. So that mindset should not be there. And that is why there's a lot of hue and cry to repeal the act. Subsequent to that, somewhere a few years back, the Supreme Court also passed certain judgment, and they also restricted the use of this act, restricted the use of these powers. After that, a few years back, a Reddy Commission was appointed, and Reddy Commission also suggested the repeal of this act. I am not saying that because of this one incident, there should be straightway repeal of the act. I do feel and do realize that there have to be immunity. There have to be some sort of, encouragement for the forces to work there. Otherwise, they'll not like to go there, and ultimately, you'll not be able to keep a situation under control. Secondly, if they have to repeal it, then the question is how far we should go.
Let me just stop you here, Mr. Sipal. My first question was, what exactly is the act? What is the immunity that this act provides?
Yes,
what is it that the act says that protects the defense forces from any action that they do?
I have given not section by section, I've told you the Armed Forces Special Power Act provides the immunity in terms of arrests without warrants, in terms of searches without any powers. But powers are given to the army and the armed forces, and also to shoot as if when the question is whether they're attacked, then you shoot, or whether they're likely to attack, you shoot. So the powers of shoot is also there. And it is in those areas which are declared as disturbed areas. Unfortunately, the government or the political parties have also applied this act in certain states wherever they felt. This act is applicable now in J&K also. This act was at one time applicable in the whole of the Arunachal Pradesh. Gradually, in the three states, this act has been withdrawn. For example, Assam, some districts are still under this act. In Arunachal Pradesh, about three districts are still under this act. In others, one of Tripura, it was withdrawn to a great extent. So I am of the view, I am considering in terms of the hue and cry whether the act should be withdrawn, whether this draconian powers they say it's a draconian power, should be there or not.
Suresh,
Pawan, may I just read out the key provisions of the Act?
One second, Suresh, hear me out. I want you to explain. You've been operating in this area. What is the immunity that the armed forces gets because of the implementation of this act?
One
Okay,
line,
wait.
immunity is that
Oh,
they
one
can
second. Let Mr.
I'll tell you. The one line I reply you cover. One line immunity is that they cannot be brought up for prosecution in the court of law. Except now recently when the Supreme Court gives judgment, they said they are culpable and they can be brought out. Otherwise, they are not liable to be brought out for
No.
any prosecution before the court of law.
Now, Suresh, when you operate in that
I'll tell
area,
you. Pawan,
Yeah.
Pawan, I'll tell you. As on today, in one line, prosecution of the officer on duty needs prior permission of the central government. That is the provision as on now.
That is
That
as
is
of
AFSPA
now, sir.
provision.
That is, sir. Suresh,
After
also
amended.
that after the Supreme Court judgment,
Correct,
they are
correct.
still
That's what I'm
not
saying.
doing it.
Why are
After the
you
Supreme
going
Court
back on
judgment,
history? Let
they're
us.
still not doing it.
no,
Wait, please,
Suresh,
please. It's an empowering act. It's an empowering act. Let me also put one thing in perspective. Why is Armed Forces Special Powers Act at all implemented? Only when the area is disturbed. Who declares the area disturbed? Does the army declare the area disturbed? The state government, recommendation to the governor, central government declares army area disturbed. Only where area disturbed is the AFSPA applicable. If the central government, state government, in their wisdom, think Nagaland is not disturbed, let them say it is not disturbed. It's not disturbed area. AFSPA goes automatically. So
now,
it is.
let me.
My submission.
I also
one line. One line. I definitely agree with you. I am not saying whether to declare disturbed or not. I am saying after the area has been declared disturbed, should this act continue to be operated? Or should this have to be applicable? You may declare an area disturbed and there should be some other modulation. If you want to safeguard or if you want that
Okay.
the people working there, but this sort of attitude, cultivating this sort of attitude in this mindset of the people is not in terms of either sanctity of the constitution or in terms of validity of the constitution.
Okay,
But
now,
still,
All right, I'll
no,
reply
no,
that.
no, just hold on. Do you think that this particular ambush, which went horribly wrong, was based on the premise that we are covered by the Armed Forces Special Power Act, and therefore, even if this ambush goes wrong, we are quite happy with it?
the question
Pawan,
to me,
please, to me or to him? I think
To
I'll
anyone,
answer.
yeah, okay, you answer to this.
Let me tell you, yaar. The Jawan doesn't even know what is bloody AFSPA, yaar. Please, for heaven's sake, yaar. He doesn't even know. He goes for the orders. He says, there is a party, you have to do your job. That's all they know. AFSPA comes when you and me discuss and in air-conditioned room. There on the ground, there's no AFSPA. It's just a protection given so that every country, every self, country which has got self in or some respect, have some protection for its armed forces acting. You are only giving legal protection for your act. Unfortunately, Pawan, are you taught to shoot to injure or shoot to kill? We are taught
Well,
shoot to kill. Unfortunately, that's how we are. That's how it has to be. So as long you don't get the army in, if you don't want that to happen, let's not have the army in. Once the army in, it has to be that way. It has to be that way.
I think
But I can assure you, this is not botched up because of AFSPA.
Suresh, my question was different. Your answer is different. Mike, I repeat my question. The ambush has gone horribly wrong. Agreed?
Absolutely. It's botched up.
Now that the ambush went horribly wrong, do you think it was because that the people thought that since we are covered by AFSPA, even if it goes wrong, it's okay?
No. I think I answered you first, that only. Why? Because it has been botched up because of troops on ground. Obviously, troops on ground have been, as per us, as sitting in analyzing it on a computer, we are saying troops are gone. I'm just giving a speculation. But do they know? They don't even think about AFSPA. That's what I'm telling you. They don't even think about AFSPA. There's nothing of AFSPA in the background here. AFSPA comes only in Delhi and
the troops have acted to orders. Now let's say the troops have acted to orders. It is because of an intelligence failure that the troops that acted to orders, the things went wrong. Now, who's to be held responsible? It is the people who collate the intelligence or the people who execute the instructions?
No, in my opinion, if I analyze the whole incident, it's a botched up operation, but troops on ground cannot be blamed. Their hands have to be held.
Wait. It is the passage of information that brought the action that is to blame.
Let me finish. The inquiry will lead to the finding. But overall, I'm saying, if you look at it in a larger picture, it's an operation fail. India has failed to the Nagas in that extent. They have killed innocent Nagas. So, though operationally we have to hold their hands, the troops on the ground, whatever in the department actions can carry on. At the national level, the state has to take the blame. The state must take the blame. The state must apologize. State must apologize. Of course, they have admitted it to the mistake. I think much more needs to be done. Maybe the Prime Minister or the Home Minister may visit Nagaland.
Let's do that.
Because the sentiments are involved.
Just hold on. Do you think the continuity of the Armed Forces Special Power Act needs to continue? Mr. Sipal Singh.
Yeah, I have already said, and I think Brigadier Suresh pointed out that even the troops may not be knowing whether the armed forces has provides them immunity or not. First point. My submission is that a culture of intimidation, a culture of repression, a culture of sort of feeling has been created for the last 60 plus years. And we have not been able to solve, despite the fact every now and then there has been going on insurgency, height of insurgency, negotiation. Have we been able to extricate ourselves for the last 70 years by imposing AFSPA? No.
Okay.
And are by introducing armed forces? The question is, if we have not been, then are we not to extricate ourselves from the brutality and the dark days from 58 till now? Although the killings have come down, but are we going to have a dominance sort of area? Or we have to have some attitude where all the stakeholders should try to project themselves, and there should be some sort of agreement that how far we should go and not. I've already said it's not a question of their knowing, it's a question of culture. The mental attitude has set in. I am talking about the CRP, I am talking about even where the disturbance is declared anywhere in the country, BSF, anywhere in the state, I'm sorry, any state, this attitude does come because they go there and they have to face, as I told you, every nook and corner. There are insurgents or terrorists and they have to save themselves. So this sort of attitude.
Okay, Mr. Sipal, I'd like to stop you here and ask you, is it the duty of the armed forces to bring about a political settlement?
You're asking me?
Yes, because you made a statement that So the point is that the armed forces are doing a job, and to do the job, one of the tools provided to them is the Armed Forces Special Power Act. Now, the act by itself cannot arrive at a settlement. The
Agreed.
act by itself cannot derive a political process.
Absolutely. You started with a premise that, first of all, that this whether it has gone wrong or not, and secondly, that there's a hue and cry to repeal the act. I'm not saying whether the instrument is there or not, whether the need of repeal is there or not. I am talking because your introduction said whether there's a hue and cry going on about the repeal of the act. I am not attributing the fault of the army or fault of the CRP or fault on the BSF. I am clearly attributing the fault is, of course, the political bosses. But that doesn't, I am not holding a brief either for the army or for the political bosses. I am talking to you whether the army has gone wrong in the operation or not, A, whether the intelligence was correct or not, B, and thirdly, if the intelligence was not correct, if the information was not correct, then was this excess, this is up to army level, was this excess within the limits? I mean, after we have killed 8 people, another 6 people, other 8 were killed when they came with dows, etc. To let us say one officer was one of our Jawan was also killed. I am not saying. I am saying that these 3 things will come in the court of inquiry: intelligence, how far they should have gone, how far they should not have gone, who are the guilty, they'll punish them. That is entirely up to the army. I'm not trying to say A and B. Second is whether this culture should be perpetuated. Now, here is the political bosses. And I am saying the repeal is being asked to the political bosses. They have imposed Armed Force Special Powers Act. It is not the army has imposed. So the repeal is, in terms of, I'm saying repeal, also I'm saying repeal has to be modulated. You cannot have statewide repeal and throw the forces into the hands of the insurgent. But whether this is creating a culture, whether it's creating a culture of harassment, whether it's and is it solving? Is this being solved? So it's not a question of A, B party. I am talking in objectively, in terms of total objectivity, that this should have been first a restrained action. Once they had come to know that this is 6 people have been killed, after that, let us say they came with thou. I'm not saying that. It was self-defense. I'm not saying self-defense and was not there. But whether 8 killing more should have been there. B, if it is all right, the Major General is conducting inquiry. Let us see what does he say in the court of inquiry. B, whether the act is to be repealed or not. I am saying the act does need curb. We cannot allow this. It's operative everywhere. We are against. This is going against. The political boss. It's going against the constitution. It's going against the sanctuary. It's going against the Supreme Court ruling a few years back that you should not let it operate to that extent. And still, we are operating. And thirdly, is it counterproductive for the armed forces itself? Because if we set into that mentality, our strategy change. If you are in operational strategy, I have been for years in operation, anti-terrorist operation, as you know, not in Punjab, not in Nagaland, not in Manipur. When you set in a particular motion, then the strategy comes into that. Because our strategy, operational strategy in counter-terrorist operation, and our operational strategy in terms of dominancy of the area is entirely different. So we are going with a mindset which is not meant for the internal situation. That is my estimation.
Pawan,
Suresh,
he has covered a lot of issues, but I'm not going to counter any of them. But all I can say, as much as he said that Armed Forces Special Powers Act will not solve insurgency, let me also put across simple. In Manipur, all of hill districts are still under AFSPA, but the valley AFSPA has been lifted for the last about quite I think 5-6 years. Has the insurgency problem solved there? Does not be solved. If there is insurgency in Manipur, it's only in the valley. It is only the valley-based groups who are carrying out insurgency. So there is no connection between the two. It is the political determination which is required. It is getting the winning the people over, getting them on our side. That is how the insurgency can end. It's neither AFSPA repelling nor AFSPA being enacted. It doesn't matter. It is just enabling act for the army to be deployed. If it's not there, army just cannot be deployed. Do not deploy. Okay. You deploy paramilitary forces. Simple. That's what I'm saying.
Suresh, tell me something. How does the Armed Forces Special Power Act initiate human rights violation?
You asking me?
Mr. Sipal saying, yes, let's go with you first,
Okay.
sir.
No, I have already initiated. I think it's not only violates, it utterly violates human rights violation. It is a violation, and violation is there. But I say only to moralize. Since it's a human right violation, hence we should do that. I am not moralizing like the human rightists that they should be done. Human right violation is there, definitely there. Any sort of intimidation is a human right violation. Any sort of over force, use of force is a human right violation. And he said, I remember, I don't want to mention in the forum that there have been cases where in the churches some girls have been raped in Nagaland, and those inquiries have come out. So there is human rights violation. There has been a hue and cry of human rights violation. But I am going to say further that moralizing on the basis of human rights violation is not the issue involved. The issue is that whether this repeal has to be there or whether the amendment has to be there, whether we should give clear cut, absolutely coverage as we are trying to go, or we should go with the Supreme Court judgment, yes, thus far and not far beyond that. And our armed forces, our leaders, as well as the political bosses should consider that it's not only counterproductive, it is not against the sanctity of the Constitution, it is against counterproductive against our own strategies, which we have, because ultimately, why? Why should they put up? This is a question somebody says. I am not saying they should put up, because this is again will go to political, because they are not having the adequate and empowerment of the state police forces. State polices are incompetent to deal with them because their environment is such that they are in the midst of environment there. So all and all done, they are more and more dependent on central armed forces. And hence when the central armed forces go, they want to protect them so that if there is something wrong with them, then no instrument will be left with them to control them. My question is from the point of view an independent NISSMAT forum. I am not talking from point of view either from the army or from the point of the armed forces or from the human rights. I am talking that in terms of human rights, yes, this is certainly violation of human rights. Certainly violation of human rights. But I still feel that only moralizing on the human rights, we should stop the armed forces to fly. Or somebody says, why should they put it? Who should put it? The political bosses are putting us inside. The question is this. It is not, I am not defending A party or B party that the armed forces should not be put there. Whether they should put, whether we should enforce, whether the empowerment should be there for the state police forces or sufficient state police forces should be empowered, or we should impose later, a few months back, you had asked about the BSF deployment in 50 kilometer. The BSF never asked that 50 kilometer of the border they should be deployed in all the state. They put up certain things and the police and the government of India imposed it. I am saying purely in terms of constitutionality, purely in terms of human rights violation, and also that this mindset of dealing with the population whom we consider as an Indian population. If you consider totally hostile, word is hostile and they are foreigner and this thing.
Yeah.
I'd like to, I'd like to ask another question at this point of time. Ever since
Pavan, can I just put an input on this issue of human rights?
Right, go ahead, please.
Yeah. Firstly, if my information is right, Supreme Court has upheld the constitutionality of AFSPA, but has put some riders on some certain riders to soften the application of the law, which has been being absolutely complied with by the army. That is, 5 points, do's and don'ts, etc. And they're doing that. And also statistically, let me also put us all in picture. Only 5% of those cases which have been investigated by the civil or by the military have been proven correct. Only 5% cases. That's all. And wherever army has taken the case into its own court, there has been exemplary punishment for a commission of offense. There is no doubt, absolute exemplary punishment. So army has been very, very sensible. Army has, probably early 50s, 60s, when the less of the transparency, less of understanding, there have been atrocities. But as days have passed, we understand. Everybody understands. The whole world is watching. There is internet going on. Everybody knows. Transparency is there, and they are more wise. So there is violation is only an exception, total exception. But as long as the army is deployed in in disturbed areas, army has to be given protection by law. Otherwise, they cannot operate. So it is the political bosses decide whether you want to deploy the army or not. If the army, they have to be given legal protection. Otherwise, they will not be able to operate. Simple as that. So there is no question. But the application has been, to my mind, absolutely, at least over the last 10 to 15 years, excesses have been exceptions rather than the rule. Let me give an example from my during my command of brigade in Ukrul. There was a case of one Assam rifle boy with an AK-47 molesting a woman in a pond. All pressure was on me to save him. But believe me, I'm telling you, I told the CO commanding officer, please hand him over to the police station. I despise, he doesn't deserve to be an Assam rifle Jawan. He was handed over. Heaven fell on me or from my GOC. Why did you hand over to him? Next day morning, the paper was full of praise for our action. He said, see, this is how the army should behave. Then everything went all right. So the senior commanders know exactly where to draw a line and how to draw a line. It is not that we are blind and we are bloodthirsty to go after killing. We are looking at the national interest. We are looking to resolve a problem. We are here to help the administration back to normalcy. How best can we do it? And there is a lot of sense behind it. It's just a protective. It's just it's a provision so that the man does not get hung for a job he has done in good faith.
So now I think we're running out of time, but I have time for just one last question. Do you think that the Armed Forces Special Power Act needs to continue in the state of Nagaland? Mr. Sipal Singh, first to you.
I tend to agree to one point, the last point with Brigadier Suresh. Technically speaking, Armed Forces Special Power Act has been put under control by the Supreme Court ruling in 1997. The guidelines have been given by the Supreme Court that any sort of unprofessional conduct, any crime and atrocities on the people shall be liable for prosecution. The question is its applicability, whether it's being applied or not in strict terms. As Brigadier Suresh vouches that is being applied, well and good. But I am of the view that invariably we have a tendency to protect our people. Well, that has to be there. After all, they are gone there without families. But need of taking a stock and you impose one disturbed area, one point. Disturbed area is introduced, the word is under exceptional circumstances. How far, and the Armed Forces Special Power Act is introduced under exceptional circumstances. The exception will continue for 70 years. I'm asking the political bosses. 58 we impose, and the exception is still continuing in Nagaland. I am not saying why they have not negotiated at all. I am only pushing a question mark. The word is in exceptional circumstances. So these exceptional circumstances are continuing for a lot. Either you say that it's not within us, it's not within our country, or you deal with a position of taking all stakeholder into consideration and try to see. After all, palpably, the casualties have come down in the last few years in Nagaland as they were earlier. No doubt about that. That they have come down. Initially, when they were having one agreement, and every time they are going back on their agreement. NSCN, National Council of Nagaland, Isaac Mahua, is the main stakeholder. And every time, in 1975, they entered into that we'll give away our arms. They went back. Again, they are going back from their agreement. I'm not saying that is for the political bosses to consider. I am considering purely in terms of the present incident. And I am of the view that if there is a justification, it's a limited justification. It cannot be a justification of brutally killing people. Human rights violations are there, but again, we have to have some way out for them. So I am of the view that it needs strict implementation of the guidelines given by the Supreme Court, and also clear-cut policy should be laid down. After the Reddy Commission recommended that it should be repealed and it should be imposed only in exceptional circumstances. How long these exceptional circumstances will continue for continuous AFSPA in some state?
So, at the
Yeah.
moment and time, what is your considered opinion whether the Special Powers Act should continue or should get repealed? What is your answer on this?
Pawan, your question of Nagaland.
For
Operational
Nagaland,
point. Yeah,
Yes,
but
sir,
let's cover Nagaland. Operationally, and from the point of view insurgency in Nagaland is very low key. In fact, it hardly exists except NSC and IM cadres doing open extortion, running a parallel government, collecting taxes. If that can go on, acceptable by the central and the state government, end of story, period. That's it. There's nothing else happening there. There's nothing else at all happening in Nagaland. There is no insurgency. All the NSCN cadres have put their weapons in Dimapur in their camp. They are all roaming around absolutely free and fair. They even walk into posts and have lunch with the Assam Rifle people. There is no insurgency. So if the state government and the central government analyzes that the situation in Nagaland does not warrant anymore deployment of army, and disturbed areas acts is not required, just like they have done in Tripura and Meghalaya. I think it is time. It is ripe enough time. Many parts of Nagaland may not be disturbed area anymore. Many parts. And once disturbed area is removed, AFSPA automatically doesn't exist, as far as Nagaland is concerned. As far as rest of Northeast is concerned, I think again most of the, as Mr. Sipal Singh has already said, except Assam and Arunachal Pradesh, 3 districts, and hill districts of Manipur, there is nowhere else AFSPA. JNK completely is Assam, complete Assam. So Assam, again, insurgency is very low key. You can easily remove the disturbed area and make normalcy and remove the AFSPA there. There's no requirement. Northeast is by and large peaceful, except pockets here and there where you can keep the Disturbed Area Act on and AFSPA on. As long as this Disturbed Area Act and army is required, AFSPA has to be there. As far as JNK is concerned, less said the better. You all know it's an externally insurgency.
We just want to restrict ourselves to Nagaland. We just want to restrict this conversation to the area of Nagaland.
Yeah,
I'd like to thank both of you. We're running out of time. I'd like to thank the president of NISSMAT for being here, and thank you so much, Suresh, for your expertise of the area. And I thank you both for being on the NISSMAT forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pawan. It's a privilege. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suresh.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you.